Welcome back, students. In this video, we're continuing to look at the different Italian city republics or the major Italian city-states. And we're turning next to Venice. Venice was one of the oldest of the Italian city-states in the medieval period, was founded by citizens who were fleeing from Rome, and they fled to the marshes of Venice, the marshes and lagoons of Venice, where they felt, which is here in the north of Italy, where they felt they could be safe and could protect themselves from the invading barbarians. And the city becomes wealthy, a wealthy republic through trade, by trading leather and glass and salt with the Byzantine Empire. So it's very much part of that medieval dynamic that I spoke about in the previous video. It becomes a stable republic. It's led by a doge who is elected for life as the head of state. And the Doge presides over a council made up of 6 councillors and 3 judges. And the council sets the agenda for the Senate. The city Senate made up of about 300 citizens. And so this is the structure by which Venice was governed. Some people have broken down these different government departments in different ways that you can see here. This chart goes into a little more detail, extends back to the major council of 2,000 members. So then we have the Senate, smaller council, moving up through the roles of responsibility and power in the city towards the Doge. Now, in the second half of the medieval period, Venice became extremely wealthy and extremely successful by establishing a trading network and an empire throughout the Eastern Mediterranean, as you can see here. It developed a rivalry with the city of Genoa that you can see here. So Genoa is the wealthy Italian trading city to the northwest, Venice is to the northeast. Obviously, they're going to come into competition with each other, and Venice is going to come out the winner by defeating the Genoese at the Battle of Chioggia in 1380. And Genoa was basically never a major seafaring trading power again. And so Venice wins that conflict and that rivalry. After this, Venice is going to look to expand its territory on mainland Italy. And so it enters into a new rivalry, this time with the city of Milan that you can see here. So these territories that are in lighter red here, these are the efforts of the Venetians in the 15th century to expand the land under Venetian control. And so this rivalry was settled by the Peace of Lodi in 1454. And this peace treaty gives Venice considerable territory in the northeast of Italy. And so this is in many ways a high point in Venetian history, because from this point onwards, Venice is going to enter into a period of decline. There are 2 main reasons for this. The first is you have the rise of the Ottoman Empire in the east. The Ottomans are a very powerful empire. They control access to trading routes to the east that the Venetians have depended on for their economy, and the Ottomans don't grant them that access in the same way anymore. They're also putting pressure on the lands and the islands that are controlled by the Venetians. To the west, you have the rise of the Spanish and the Portuguese empires, the age of discovery in the Atlantic, and so Venice is really kind of cut off, both from trade with the east by the Ottoman Empire and from trade with the Atlantic by the Spaniards. And so this leads to a period of decline for Venice. So we talked about Venice, we talked about Naples and Sicily. Now we're going to talk about 2 cities that become more powerful during the Renaissance. And we're going to begin by talking about the city of Milan. So I just showed you where Milan was on that map, very northernmost part of Italy, kind of towards the east. And for most of the medieval period, Milan was a city that was part of the Holy Roman Empire and that was aligned with the interests of the emperors. And the first major Renaissance character that we find in the history of Milan is the figure of Matteo Visconti. His uncle Ottone had established the family as a major family in the city by fighting a war to become archbishop. So it's easy to say that, but then when you start to think about it, you start to think, wow, okay, there are some pretty crazy things that are going on in this society. So someone is fighting a war to become the archbishop. Antonio wins this war, and he makes Matteo a general within the city. And so from this point onwards, the Viscontis are going to be one of the major families in Milan, and they have a rivalry with the other major family in the city, which is the Della Torre family. And so as a result of this rivalry, Matteo is actually exiled from the city in 1302, and his house is destroyed. However, Matteo finds an ally in the emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor, Henry VII. And Henry VII is going to make Matteo his vicar of the city. And so Matteo is now the ruler of the city of Milan and controls the city. And so over the years that follow, Matteo is going to suppress the allies of the papacy, but he's also going to start to make movements to make Milan more independent of the emperors while remaining their ally. In 1322, he is excommunicated for necromancy and dies the next year. Now, if you don't know what necromancy is, it is the practice of calling people up from the dead in order to consult them about what's going to happen in the future. Obviously, a practice that was heavily frowned on by the Catholic Church. Again, it's kind of like your archbishop uncle fighting a war to be made archbishop. It raises your eyebrows when you think about it. Some people have suggested this was a political charge. Some people have suggested that no, Matteo really was doing this. We're not entirely sure, but it gives you a sense of sort of the edginess of the Renaissance, that people are very much pushing the boundaries, trying to rediscover what the boundaries are in a society that's in flux and in change. So what have we learned by studying Matteo Visconti? We've learned that the dynamics of politics and religion in this society are increasingly intertwined and complicated, that Italian rulers are becoming more independent. After Matteo's death, we have a series of Visconti rulers, but none of them are particularly important. They all basically fight with one another and squabble with one another until we have the rise of Gian Galeazzo Visconti as the next major figure in this dynasty. He becomes the ruler, the leader of the Visconti and the ruler of Milan by treacherously ambushing his uncle in a religious procession. He had been a sickly youth who we're told was someone who spent his childhood studying rather than playing, but he is considered he's considered a master political tactician as a result of this. He's fiercely defensive of his family. People have suggested, again, like I say, part of the edginess of the Renaissance, there are all these conspiracy theories. People have suggested that Gian Galeazzo passed information about the French to the Ottomans, so passed information from a Christian power to a Muslim power, and tried to poison the French king when someone in the French king's household had insulted the dignity of his daughter. But he was a very successful ruler of Milan. He achieved the city's independence from the empire in 1395, and he established the first European state bureaucracy, so departments of accounting and public health that were designed to increase the stability of his rule and his government of the city. So here's one of the major themes that I said we'd be concentrating on this course: the consolidation of power in the hands of the government. Gian Galeazzo is also a major patron of the arts. So he builds the really magnificent Visconti castle that you see in this picture. He is also someone who collects manuscripts, and he really cared about this manuscript collection. We're told that a number of times when he defeated his enemies in war, he made giving him the more valuable and the rarer manuscripts that they held in their possession, he made that one of the terms of the peace treaty. So this is something that he genuinely cared about. He funds and oversees the expansion of the University of Milan. And he oversees a very successful Milanese economy, the creation of a very successful Milanese army. He expands the rule of Milan. You can see that from this map here, that he is expanding the areas under the control of the city further and further out, and he is expected in the early 1400s to become the king of all of Italy. And we're told that he'd even taken out the ancient historic Iron Crown of the kings of Italy and was preparing for a coronation ceremony, was preparing to claim this title, but he died while he was besieging the city of Florence in 1402. What did he die from? He died from the Black Death. And so with Gian Galeazzo Visconti, we see this centralization of government power. And so whereas previously rulers had to kind of negotiate their power with their subordinates, with their vassals, just as we talked about when we talked about the economic effects of the Black Death, now that power is kind of being consolidated and centralized by the rulers using state bureaucrats. We also see that the patronage of art is becoming part of the responsibility of the ruler. It's starting to be seen as part of the responsibility of the ruler. Now, in the medieval period, this was largely considered the responsibility of the church. So this is once again a sign of the way that the rulers, secular rulers during this period, are becoming more and more powerful. They're consolidating certain aspects that previously had been outside of their control or outside their influence more and more in their sphere of rule and government. Now, Gian Galeazzo's sons were relatively self-indulgent and weak rulers, and the kingdom of Gian Galeazzo disintegrated fairly quickly. Now, Gian Galeazzo had fought his very successful campaigns using a type of soldier called a condottieri soldier. It's basically a mercenary soldier. So here we have a kind of an interesting intersection with the 100 Years' War. Soldiers who were fighting in this war during periods of truce would come down to Italy and would be paid to fight for these different competing groups and these different rival cities in Italy. Now, the most famous of these soldiers was an Italian named Francesco Sforza. Francesco Sforza is interesting because he comes from a very difficult family background. He is an illegitimate child. He's the son of a mercenary soldier, but he receives the loyalty of his father's soldiers. He's famous for being exceptionally powerful, and we're told he could even bend an iron bar with his bare hands. Eventually, as we move into the 15th century, the ruling figure of the Visconti family, that's now become kind of a weakened family, they turn to Francesco Sforza, the most powerful soldier, the most powerful general in the society, and basically they persuade him to marry their daughter in order to strengthen their family's position. The daughter is the heir to the Visconti fortune and to rule of the city of Milan. There are no competing sons within this particular family tree. They want to stabilize their family, and so they turn to Francesco and they marry him into this family, even though he was much older than the daughter of the Visconti at the time. When this member of the Visconti family dies without an heir, he seizes control of the city in 1450. And he shows himself to be a very successful ruler. He achieves financial stability in the city. Once again, he is a patron of Renaissance learning and art. He funds a hospital. He restores one of the palaces in Milan, the Palazzo Ducale that you can see here. And he is successful in organizing peace in Italy. So the Peace of Lodi that I mentioned when we were talking about Venice, basically that's the result of years of warfare and rivalry between Milan and Venice. When Francesco Sforza becomes the ruler of Milan, even though he is a man of war, he's a soldier, that's how he's made his career, he recognizes the importance of peace. He works with the cities of Venice and Florence to establish this peace, and basically it's a state of peace that will remain in Italy for about the next 50 years. So that's considered a significant achievement. And so whereas the Visconti have been trying to set up this Italian kingdom that they ruled, Francesco instead renounces that in favor of peace and a sphere of influence. Gradually, however, after his rule, we're going to see increased increased French influence in Milan. Milan is more and more going to be controlled by the French kingdom.